Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to run through some common mistakes that people often make when they're trying to render realistic fur. So this is a video on how not to draw fur, and I'm also going to show you a version of how you can fix those mistakes and learn from them and how you can render realistic fur. So one of the first common problems when people are drawing fur is that they use too hard a pressure to begin with. So when you're layering, you need to use some really light layers, and I see that people often go straight in on their fur with really hard pressure and push really hard on the pencil, and that actually damages that tooth of the paper and inhibits your ability to add further layers. So if you're thinking that you're going to be able to add details and everything with your final layers, it's going to be really difficult because you've already pushed onto the paper and burnished it out slightly on your very first layer. And that is something that really inhibits people from adding those layers and getting it to look realistic and natural. So when it comes to adding the second layer, I see a lot of people often don't follow the first layer. So for instance, the first layer, they've put the coloured pencil down going vertically, and then when it comes to the second layer, they've gone horizontally, so they've gone in the opposite direction to the way that they did the original layer. And that's not something that you want to do. You want to make sure that you always follow your very first layer. So if you've made fur strokes that are going down and you've shaded going down vertically, you want to follow that with all of your layers. Otherwise you're going to get a really unnatural look. It's going to look really messy, it's going to look really scribbly, and that's not how fur looks. And that's not how it should be rendered either. You need to make sure that you follow with all of your layers the direction that the fur is going in from your very first layer. Another mistake that people often make is not having a sharp enough pencil. So you need to make sure that you have a really sharp pencil to get a really consistent layer of colour down. And you can see that as I'm adding the dark sepia down here, my pencil isn't sharp here, and you can see the really inconsistent tone there, and this also ties in with the hard pressure as well. When you're using a hard pressure and a blunt pencil, you get this really inconsistent tone. You can see there are really dark patches, there's really light patches, and you can see as I'm moving my hand, I'm just sort of scribbling over that to try and get the colour down. And the reason I can't get the colour down on this as well is because I've burnished too early. I burnished in that very first layer. It's really difficult to get any sort of detail down and any consistent tone because I've gone in with a blunt pencil, I'm using hard pressure, and the previous layers have all been burnished out, so I'm not able to add any details or get that consistent layer of colour down that I really want. Another mistake that people make is going in too dark to begin with the pencil, and again this goes hand in hand with being too heavy-handed, going in with too much pressure on your pencil. It's going to create a really heavy dark tone, and it's going to be really difficult to match that tone across the entire portrait if you begin that way. So you can see on the how not to draw fur circle, the tone is so inconsistent, it looks so scribbly, it doesn't look natural at all, it looks really messy, it's not smooth, there's no detail, and I couldn't get that detail in because I'd burnished, had no sharp point on my pencil. It just doesn't look like a good patch of fur, and obviously I have sort of exaggerated this a bit. Mistakes aren't often this bad, but you kind of get the idea. By not having a sharp point, by using hard pressure, by layering in different directions, you're just going to get a really messy look, and that's not something that you want to strive for when you're trying to draw realism. So how can you fix these mistakes, and what should you do when you're trying to draw fur? The first thing is to make sure that you layer lightly. So you can see as I'm working on this correct circle of fur now, I'm just really layering lightly. I'm using the side of my pencil, I'm using it lightly across the entire piece, and you can see that there is a nice consistent tone there. And then when I'm going in with my second layer, what I'm doing is making sure that I follow that previous layer's fur direction. So you can see I'm going in exactly the same direction. I'm going vertically, I'm not going horizontally like I did in the previous circle. And you can see again I've got a nice consistent layer of colour down there, and that's because I've got that sharp pencil, I'm using a really light layer, and everything's going down really nice and smoothly. So when it comes to adding the dark sepia, I'm using the same technique again. So I'm using a sharp pencil, I'm using light pressure, I'm layering in the same direction that those previous 2 layers were going in, and I'm slowly building up the colour, and you can see that I'm getting a nice consistent layer of colour down, and I'm slowly building up to get to that dark. I'm not going straight in and using a heavy pressure with my hand to get that really, really dark patch that I want to get in first. I'm slowly building up the colour with the dark sepia pencil. I'm also making sure that I am using first strokes for this layer. So the previous 2 layers I actually just shaded the entire thing in the direction that I needed it to go. But with this layer, what I'm doing is creating really, really small first strokes. So you can see me adding them now. I'm just creating what looks like grass, and I'm lifting the pencil as I come towards the tip of a particular hair, and I'm just repeating that entire process across the entire thing. So you can also see on the side there where I've ticked and crossed the technique that I've used. On the tick version, you can see that they're really, really overlapping, they're really concentrated, and on the crossed out version, they're just really static, they're parallel lines, there's no overlap, and it doesn't look soft. So what you want to do is make sure that you overlap your lines like in the ticked version, and you want to make sure that they're quite concentrated together so you get a really nice smooth application of colour as well. So once I've done that first layer of the dark sepia, I'm then going over and darkening up the areas that I want to be darker. So this is mainly at the top. You can see I'm just adding a further layer, and again I'm using that fur method. I'm using those lines which are quite concentrated together and overlapping. I'm using a light pressure. You can see that I'm kind of got a loose grip on my pencil, and I'm using it slightly to the side as well, not really holding it dead straight to get that colour down. So throughout this, I'm making sure that I resharpen my pencil, because as I said, it's really important to have a really sharp pencil. Having a sharp pencil actually lays down the colour a lot darker, and it enables you to get that really, really dark pigment down. So that's where we went wrong on the how not to draw fur circle. We went in with the blunt pencil and pushed really hard, and you can see the difference between the 2 circles. On the right hand circle, the correct one, I've got a nice dark pigment at the top, and then it fades down into this lighter pigment at the bottom, and that's because I've lightly layered, I've blended out, I've used these first strokes and haven't gone in with hard pressure, just really, really light layers, sharp pencil, working in the same direction, and you can see just how natural it's looking compared to the left hand side circle. So those are my common mistakes and the ways to fix them when you want to draw realistic and render realistic looking fur like this. As I said, the how not to draw fur circle on the left is really exaggerated. You don't really come across very many pieces that actually look like that. It is entirely exaggerated for the purpose of this video, but you can kind of understand the mistakes that people often make. So I know myself, when I first started, I went in with hard pressure and I burnished too early, and I found it really, really difficult to add details, and I'm completely guilty of that one myself. It took me a while to teach myself to actually use light pressure and to layer slowly rather than rush through a piece. So I'm guilty of that one myself. I'd love to know of any other mistakes that you think people make when they're drawing or rendering realistic fur. So leave me a comment down below of some of the mistakes that you think people make, maybe even mistakes that you've made yourself. Are there any others that you would like to add to this list? As always, thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope it's helped you to establish or maybe recognise some mistakes that you might be making, and maybe something to make sure that you avoid when you're trying to draw fur as well. And hopefully the correct version has given you a few insights and tips as to how I render my fur realistically as well. If you're new around here and you like this video, then make sure that you hit that subscribe button and tick that bell icon for all of my future tutorials and other videos which I release on this channel. I upload 3 times a week, so there's always something useful and handy going on here. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and tick that bell icon to be notified of all of my videos. If you like this video, then give it a thumbs up, and I'd love to hear your suggestions on other videos that you'd like to see as well. Don't forget to follow me on all of my social media sites. I'm on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and I will catch you in another video. Bye!